There's a quiet battle raging within you, isn't there? A constant hum of doubt, a persistent whisper that undermines your efforts, even as you strive with all your might. You might look at your circumstances, the demanding job, the economic pressures, the opportunities that seem to slip through your fingers, and blame them for your perceived stagnation. It's a narrative many men tell themselves, a convenient explanation for why progress feels elusive. But I've learned, and you too can discover, that the most formidable adversary isn't out there, but within. It's woven into the fabric of your thoughts, the stories you repeat to yourself in the quiet solitude of your mind, the justifications you dress up as logic. The true architect of your limitations isn't a lack of external resources or a cosmic injustice. It's a deeply ingrained set of beliefs, a mindset that has, perhaps unknowingly, been programmed for self-sabotage. This isn't about external circumstances. It's about the invisible barriers erected by your own thinking. Every unchallenged thought, every assumption you've allowed to fester, can become a wall, holding you captive even as you push against it. The good news, the truly liberating news, is that these limiting thoughts, like any habit, can be unlearned. Your mind is not a fixed entity. It is a dynamic, moldable instrument. And when you shift from being a passive recipient of its directives to an active, conscious commander, your entire world transforms. Success, you see, doesn't begin when you achieve your goals. It begins the moment you cease betraying yourself with your own thoughts. It begins when you start to understand the silent architects of your own downfall. Consider this: the thoughts that seem harmless, the ones you barely notice, are often the ones that are most effectively sabotaging your forward momentum day after day. Identifying them is not an exercise in self-flagellation. It is the essential first step toward reclaiming your power, toward unlocking the extraordinary potential that resides within you, waiting to be unleashed. We are about to embark on a journey, a profound exploration into the hidden corners of your own mind, to confront these internal saboteurs. It's a journey that requires courage, honesty, and a deep commitment to the man you are capable of becoming. Together, we will peel back the layers, expose the illusions, and forge a new path, one built not on external validation, but on the unwavering foundation of self-awareness and empowered thinking. This is not just about changing outcomes. It's about fundamentally changing the source of your actions, the very core of your beliefs. We will delve into the most pervasive, yet often unrecognized, narratives that keep men bound. You'll recognize them, perhaps with a pang of discomfort, but also with a growing sense of liberation. This is the beginning of understanding that true power lies not in overcoming external obstacles, but in mastering the internal landscape. This is where transformation truly begins. You are not the sum of your past failures or perceived inadequacies. You are the sum of your present choices, and today, we choose a different path. We choose to face the inner critic, to dismantle the self-imposed limitations, and to step into a reality where your potential is not a distant dream, but an imminent possibility. This exploration is vital, not to dwell on the past, but to illuminate the path forward, to equip you with the insight and the tools to build a life of profound achievement and unshakable fulfillment. This is the promise of this journey, a promise of awakening, empowerment, and enduring growth. The first insidious thought that quietly corrodes a man's ambition is the silent, pervasive belief, "I am not enough." This isn't a shouted accusation, but a deep-seated feeling, a constant companion to self-doubt. It surfaces when you compare yourself to others, when a flicker of hesitation precedes a significant decision, when you see someone else seemingly more prepared, more skilled, or more ready. This internal narrative, this notion that there's an inherent deficiency within you, a missing piece or a fundamental flaw, acts as a powerful deterrent. It doesn't stop you because it's factually true, but because you have repeated it so many times that your subconscious has embraced it as gospel. Once this programming takes root, your brain naturally seeks evidence to confirm its validity rather than challenging it. Consequently, it nudges you towards smaller choices, limited aspirations, and a general tendency to settle for less. You might find yourself postponing crucial actions or hesitant to showcase your talents, not due to any actual incapacity, but out of a misguided loyalty to that old, persistent lie. I am not enough. This deceptive whisper infiltrates every aspect of your demeanor. How you carry yourself, the cadence of your speech, the directness of your gaze, the very substance of your decisions. It renders you lukewarm, insecure, and hesitant, for if, at your core, you believe you fall short, you unconsciously create conditions to prevent yourself from truly winning. Because if you win, you fear you'll be exposed, revealed as an imposter. This is the foundational thought that underpins most of your personal roadblocks, a fear not of failure itself, but of others discovering you don't truly deserve success. This is where you dismantle yourself without even realizing it, by sidestepping opportunities, shying away from challenges, and clinging to the safety of the familiar. Then, you justify these actions with rationalizations. It wasn't the right time, I wasn't feeling it, I just didn't have the bandwidth. But the stark reality is that a part of you decided to halt progress because it genuinely believes you are unworthy. You must grasp this with a sense of urgency. No one who believes they are undeserving can ever reach significant heights. No one can evolve into their optimal self from a place of deep-seated hurt or inadequacy. You must actively rewrite this belief, not when you achieve tangible results, nor when external validation finally arrives. You must do it now, even if it stings, even if you lack concrete proof, even if the echoes of the past vehemently contradict it. Look yourself in the mirror and declare with unwavering conviction, I am enough, not for what I have accomplished, but for what I have resolved to build. When you internalize this sufficiency, your actions begin to change. You speak with greater clarity, make decisions with renewed resolve, and cease seeking permission to occupy your rightful space. This seemingly minor thought is responsible for derailing countless lives because its insidious nature prevents immediate detection. It doesn't shout, it merely whispers, yet it whispers daily, and what is whispered daily eventually hardens into immutable law. Your solemn duty, your profound responsibility, is to shatter this law, to silence this voice. For as long as you allow it to dictate your reality, you will continue to act like a man apologizing for daring to grow, and such a man can never truly advance. But if you recognize it today, if you resolve to stop obeying it, you are no longer the same person. Because the individual who transforms their root beliefs irrevocably transforms their destiny. Furthermore, a second, equally silent, yet arguably more perilous, thought consistently undermines a man's progress. It's too late for me. This thought surfaces when you witness others advancing, when you contemplate initiating something new, and your mind floods with reminders of your age, past failures, and previous attempts that fell short. This belief has a paralyzing effect because it masquerades as logic, presenting a seemingly irrefutable case. If only you had started sooner, you'd be further along. If you hadn't made those errors, you'd be in a better position today. If you hadn't hesitated, you would have already arrived. And so, you become trapped in a loop, lamenting the past while being paralyzed in the present, treating time as the adversary rather than your own inaction. The most tragic aspect of this too late notion is that it often cloaks itself in what feels like profound wisdom, making you believe you are merely being mature and realistic. However, this is merely an excuse disguised as introspection, because it is not the passage of time that limits you, but what you have consciously chosen to do with it. It is irrelevant whether you are 30, 40, 50, or beyond. It matters little if you have failed once, a dozen times, or 100. What truly matters is whether you still possess the breath of life and the resolve in your gaze. For there are men who surrender their ambitions by 25, and others who embark on their most significant journeys at 60. The divergence lies not in the ticking clock, but in the mental framework. You must actively dismantle this idea that your prime has passed. There is no such thing as the perfect moment. The only moment that counts is the one you consciously decide to seize, and that moment is invariably now. Every minute spent wallowing in regret is a minute stolen from the man you could become, from the venture you might still launch, from the relationships you could still cultivate, from the physical well-being you could still achieve, from the discipline you are yet capable of adopting. You have no dominion over the past, but you possess absolute control over what you do with the remaining time. And if each morning begins with the declaration, it's too late, you are silently signing your own surrender. You are accepting a future of mediocrity in exchange for an immutable past. Examine yourself with unvarnished honesty. Ask yourself with stark candor, who benefits from this belief? Does your highest potential? Your purpose? Your family, if you have one? The person you aspire to be? Clearly, the answer is no. It serves only that part of you that craves justification for inaction, that seeks refuge from the risk of trying again. But that part cannot lead your life. It must be silenced. And it is silenced when you rise and act, when you harness your age as fuel, not as an impediment, when you use your lived experiences as a foundation, not as a prison. Life is not measured in years, but in decisions. And every decision made with conviction can reclaim lost time, compress progress, and reignite your drive. It is never too late if the fire still burns within. It is never too late if your will to act still breathes. However, if you permit this thought to continue dictating your mornings, you will forever be walking in circles, murmuring what will eventually become your epitaph. I could have been more. Do not permit this. Not today. Not you. Because while the clock never stops, neither does your capacity to choose a different path. The third insidious whisper that can sabotage your ascent, often disguised as modesty or a preference for the background, is the seemingly innocuous thought, I don't want to stand out. This may be framed as a lack of interest in the spotlight, a desire to operate behind the scenes, or a quiet aversion to drawing attention. While these sentiments can sometimes stem from genuine humility, more often than not, they are rooted in a potent fear, the fear of exposure, of criticism, of shining brightly only to have your light extinguished by judgment or envy. Consequently, you might shrink yourself, dimming the brilliance of your talents, muffling your innovative ideas, and minimizing your very presence. You do this believing it offers a shield, a way to circumvent trouble and maintain a perceived safety. However, in reality, this act is a form of self-annihilation. You effectively erase yourself from consideration for opportunities before they even materialize, because the world is not compelled to seek out your hidden value. It won't roll out a red carpet to discover what you possess if you yourself are buried in anonymity. You must consciously choose to reveal yourself, to amplify your voice, to claim your space, not out of vanity, but out of a profound sense of responsibility. Your personal growth is not solely a solitary pursuit. It has a ripple effect, benefiting everyone who crosses your path, your family, your colleagues, your community. When you remain silent, you offer no assistance. When you hide, you effect no transformation. And if your strategy is to wait until you feel entirely ready before stepping forward, you will wait indefinitely. True readiness is rarely a feeling, it is a commitment. It is that internal drive that propels you forward, even when tremors of doubt persist. Understand that your inherent capacity for greatness is not an indulgence, it is an obligation. To conceal yourself is not humility, it is a betrayal of your own potential. To minimize your own significance does not make you more approachable, it renders you less impactful. No one can contribute meaningfully from the shadows. Moreover, this pervasive I don't want to stand out mentality is often tethered to a deeper, more primal fear, the dread of not being able to sustain success, the anxiety of reaching a certain level only to falter. Yet, this fear is not conquered by evasion, it is overcome by growth. It is addressed by diligent preparation, by embracing calculated risks, and by accepting the inevitability of occasional missteps, recognizing that these do not define you. What truly defines you is your capacity to appear, to rise again after a fall, and to persistently present yourself until your voice, your character, and your impact become undeniable. To stand out is not about being the loudest in the room. It's about embodying authenticity, demonstrating resilience, and holding steadfast to your vision. If that vision makes you uncomfortable, it's a sign it's potent, that it challenges you, and that it's pushing you toward a more expanded version of yourself. Therefore, do not conceal it, do not diminish it, do not postpone its expression. Speak, write, share, propose, create, and above all, walk with the unwavering conviction that your presence holds value, that your ideas possess strength, and that your story, truthfully told, has the power to transform others. Because the man who ceases to fear visibility begins to occupy the very position destiny has reserved for him from the outset. And that position is not in the shadows. It is at the forefront, bathed in light, vocally present, and actively engaged. That is where you are needed, and that is where you must be. The fourth insidious thought that stealthily sabotages your success often cloaks itself in the guise of prudence, of careful planning, of rational foresight. It's the quiet voice that says, "It's not the right time yet." This seemingly sensible rationale, this suggestion of waiting for ideal conditions, is in fact an elegant form of paralysis. It's a justification for inaction, a carefully constructed excuse to avoid the discomfort and uncertainty that inevitably accompany any meaningful pursuit. If you're truly honest with yourself, you might recognize this refrain echoing through months, even years, of your life. Not now, you tell yourself, but when I have more resources, when this project is finished, when I'm better prepared, when the market shifts. And so, life continues to unfold, while the perfect moment you're anticipating remains perpetually out of reach, a mirage on the horizon. The truth is, there is no such thing as a universally perfect moment for significant action. Life is inherently dynamic, filled with flux, uncertainty, and a constant stream of demands. If your strategy is to wait for everything to align, for all external variables to stabilize, you will undoubtedly find yourself waiting indefinitely. And if you do not act, you are, by definition, already experiencing failure. This waiting game has extinguished more dreams than the fear of outright failure, because at least the man who tries and fails has engaged with his aspiration. The man who waits for the ideal moment never even begins. He becomes an architect of unbuilt structures, a master of blueprints that never see the light of day, a repository of ideas that sound compelling but never touch the ground. Tragically, he begins to internalize this procrastination as wisdom, believing he is being strategic, when in fact, he is succumbing to cowardice, sidestepping the very challenges that foster growth. Stepping forward now, with the resources, knowledge, and capabilities you currently possess, means confronting your genuine limitations. It means facing the possibility of fumbling, of not executing flawlessly, of feeling exposed. But it is precisely in this confrontation, in this chosen chaos and calculated risk, that true transformation ignites. You are not meant to wait for the universe to orchestrate a flawless environment. Instead, you must become the orchestrator, aligning yourself with your purpose by acting from where you stand, with what you have, and with what you can manage right now. This is where genuine personal evolution occurs, not in the sterile comfort of preparedness, but in the fertile ground of chosen disruption, in the risk that jolts you awake, in the decision that shakes the foundations of your inertia. If this message resonates deeply within you, if you feel a stirring in your soul, a conviction that this isn't mere chance but a timely revelation, then consider this a pivotal moment. Subscribe not for the sake of the channel, but for the profound promise you are about to make to yourself. The commitment is simple: no more waiting. I will act now. This is not about accumulating more information. It is about cultivating more action. Each subsequent piece of content will serve as a reminder, a catalyst, a gentle nudge to propel you out of that prolonged state of dormancy that has held you captive for too long. Take a moment to affirm this commitment in the comments. I do not need the perfect moment. I act now. Write it not for external validation, but as a personal declaration, a timestamp marking the day you stopped seeking permission, the day you looked in the mirror and declared, "I am ready, even if I don't feel ready," because that is where true change is forged, not in certainty, but in commitment. And commitment does not wait. Commitment decides. Commitment acts. The man who acts, even with trepidation, inevitably outpaces the man who waits. Always. The fifth mindset that silently sabotages your progress, often disguised as a commitment to excellence, is the notion, it's not worth doing if it's not perfect. This belief compels you to delay, to endlessly revise, to never feel truly ready. If the execution can't be flawless, if it doesn't precisely match the idealized image in your mind, you're inclined to postpone it indefinitely, or worse, abandon it before it even begins. This pursuit of perfection, which seems like a noble aspiration, is in reality a cleverly concealed trap a sophisticated manifestation of fear masquerading as high standards. It is a defense mechanism, an elegant strategy to avoid the vulnerability of imperfect action, thereby choosing immobility over progress. Consider this: the individual who insists on absolute perfection before taking even a single step has, in essence, opted out of the game entirely. They have conflated high quality with complete paralysis. The world, however, does not reward meticulousness in a vacuum. It rewards action, iteration, learning, and the courage to re-engage after setbacks. You do not require perfection to initiate your endeavors. You require authenticity. You need to take that initial stride, however awkward, however unpolished, however lacking in technique, aesthetic, or experience it may seem. What truly propels you to the next echelon of achievement isn't flawless execution from the outset, but consistent effort, adaptive adjustments, and the sustained journey undertaken with deliberate intent. You do not become a man of success because every endeavor unfolds perfectly from the start. You become a man of success because you refuse to be halted by imperfection. You persevere because you don't require external validation to continue. You don't need flawlessness to advance. The most poignant consequence of this perfectionistic mindset is its inherent theft of your learning opportunities. The man who hesitates to begin, fearing imperfect execution, is a man who shields himself from error and, consequently, from growth. Conversely, the individual who launches forth with humility, openness, and genuine courage absorbs lessons at an exponentially faster rate than one who merely observes from the sidelines. They are in the arena, experiencing firsthand what is required, living the process rather than simply theorizing about it. And it is this experiential learning, even when accompanied by scrapes and bruises, that hones your skills, fortifies your resilience, and fosters genuine development. Take a moment for candid reflection. How many projects have you placed on indefinite hold because they didn't meet your stringent self-imposed standards? How many brilliant ideas have withered and died in your mind because they weren't yet ready? How many invaluable opportunities have you allowed to slip through your grasp, simply out of apprehension that you wouldn't execute them perfectly? These were not rational decisions. They were acts of fear, elaborately decorated. And if you fail to acknowledge this pattern, you risk perpetuating it throughout your life. You will likely find yourself admiring those who dared, while silently admonishing yourself for your own inaction. Dismantle this limiting belief today. Allow yourself to execute imperfectly, if necessary. But execute. Publish. Record. Write. Speak. Propose. Attempt. For the individual who dares to present their imperfect self advances 1,000 times further than the one who endlessly trains in solitude, anticipating an invincible state. This progress, even if incremental and seemingly unremarkable, builds a formidable character. A man who respects himself because he acts, because he understands that perfection is not the prerequisite for initiating his purpose, but rather the eventual outcome of numerous courageous attempts and persistent forward motion. That man, the man who acts without feeling fully prepared, is the one who invariably succeeds. The sixth critical thought that subtly orchestrates your self-sabotage operates under the guise of self-acceptance, a seemingly benign declaration. I've always been this way. This statement, often uttered with a sigh of resignation, acts as a potent, invisible chain. When you utter it, you're not merely acknowledging a pattern. You're fundamentally stating, I am incapable of genuine transformation. You're proclaiming that your past experiences, your accumulated habits, and your perceived inherent nature have irrevocably fixed your future. This is a dangerous fallacy. No identity is more restrictive than one that deems itself final. If you firmly believe you are fundamentally unchangeable, then no matter how many goals you set, how many self-help books you devour, or how many motivational videos you watch, your entire cognitive framework will conspire to reinforce this very notion. It's not that you lack the capacity for change. It's that your ingrained thinking has erected an insurmountable barrier. Consider the reflexive pronouncements. I've always been disorganized. I'm just naturally lazy. Patience has never been my strong suit. Or, I struggle to maintain focus. These are not objective descriptions. They are self-imposed verdicts, labels you've applied to yourself over years, and by repeating them, You compel your mind to construct your behavior around these self-limiting narratives. Your brain prioritizes consistency above all else. If you identify as disorganized, your actions will naturally align with that identity to avoid creating cognitive dissonance. If you claim a lack of discipline, your subconscious will readily find methods to confirm that deficiency. An identity that is repeatedly declared becomes a direct command to your subconscious mind, shaping your reality accordingly. Therefore, to alter your outward circumstances, you must first address the root, your deeply held beliefs about who you are. You are not defined by your recurring habits, nor by the flaws you've come to accept as immutable. You are, rather, the sum of what you consciously choose to become, starting from this very moment. The process of genuine change isn't about erasing your history or pretending it never happened. It's about courageously rewriting that narrative. It's about acknowledging, this was my reality up until this point. You don't need to deny the difficulties you've faced or gloss over your past mistakes. However, you must decisively declare that you are no longer willing to let your fragmented past dictate your future. What you repeatedly affirm, you strengthen. If your daily affirmations revolve around what you don't want to be, you will continue to construct yourself from that very foundation. You must consciously shift your internal dialogue. Replace those automatic, detrimental phrases with deliberate, empowering affirmations. Instead of the habitual, "I've always been this way," consciously articulate, "Today, I am choosing to act differently." Instead of, "I'm not a disciplined person," declare, "I am actively cultivating my discipline every single day." Rather than, "I'm too impulsive," state, "I am developing greater control over my emotional responses." This isn't about fabricating a falsehood. It's about issuing a new directive to your mind, initiating a fresh programming sequence. This consistent, daily recalibration is the very mechanism that reshapes behavior, because what you declare with conviction day after day inevitably crystallizes into your lived experience. Do not allow your past to negate your potential. Do not settle for an identity that confines you. You possess the inherent power to break free from that narrative. You can choose to embody a new version of yourself, deciding from this moment forward, from this very thought, that you are not a prisoner of your history. You are in a state of constant evolution, possessing the inherent right to grow and adapt. You don't require external permission to change. All you need is volition, a resolute decision, and an inner voice that firmly asserts, "Today, I choose to be different." And that single choice is sufficient to initiate a profound transformation. The seventh insidious thought, masquerading as practicality and emotional maturity, serves as a subtle yet potent form of self-betrayal. I don't want to be disappointed again. This notion often surfaces after investing significant time, energy, and hope into an endeavor, only to experience a lack of desired outcomes. The pain of a shattered expectation, of a dream unrealized, prompts your mind to erect a defensive shield. Better not to get my hopes up. Better not to expect too much. Better not to dream too big. While this defense mechanism might seem protective, it is, in reality, a slow form of internal erosion. A life devoid of hope, without forward momentum, and without ambitious goals is a life lived in perpetual twilight. This mindset cultivates a cautious, self-measuring existence, a state of being that simply sees what happens rather than actively driving toward desired outcomes. The preference for avoiding the sting of potential failure leads to the avoidance of soaring success. You cannot advance effectively when one foot is firmly on the brake. Building anything substantial is impossible when your internal engine is sputtering with doubt, excessive caution, and a visceral fear of setbacks. This fear, if left unchecked, will confine you to the mundane, the predictable, the lukewarm. And lukewarm living, by its very nature, fails to inspire transformation or leave a lasting imprint. It's crucial to grasp that you were not brought into existence solely to protect yourself from pain. You are here to grow, to discover, to expand your horizons. This journey will inevitably involve disappointments, moments of falling short, and outcomes that diverge from your expectations. However, only by daring to embrace these challenges can you unlock experiences of true greatness. You must choose to re-engage with the process wholeheartedly, even if it means risking hurt once more. No person of true strength has ever been forged by evading adversity. Strength is cultivated by confronting challenges, overcoming them, and learning to rise not just faster, but wiser, more resolute, and more firmly grounded. If your primary aim is to avoid disappointment, you will ultimately end up disappointed in yourself. You will know, deep down, that you didn't truly give yourself the chance, that you held back, that you navigated life from a place of fear and excessive precaution. This is a far heavier burden than any temporary fall. Today, confront that thought head-on. Acknowledge it, perhaps even express gratitude for its intended protective function, and then consciously release it. You no longer require excessive protection. You require greater courage, unwavering decisiveness, and a deep commitment to your future self. Tell yourself, can I withstand disappointment? The answer is yes. What you truly cannot endure is living a life of stagnation. The man who dares, even when he loses, always gains something invaluable: experience, character, clarity. These are the elements that fortify him, elevate him, and gradually transform him into someone who no longer fears the act of trying. For he recognizes his own inherent resilience as greater than any single outcome. The eighth pervasive thought that subtly sabotages your success, often presented as benevolence or a commitment to fairness, is in reality a sophisticated form of self-negation. I must help everyone else first. You might find yourself repeating this when contemplating carving out personal time for your own pursuits, feeling a pang of guilt when prioritizing a personal goal because others seem to require your assistance more urgently. This internal conflict leads you to consistently place yourself last, to offer your energy, attention, and time before addressing your own fundamental needs. There is no inherent nobility in perpetually prioritizing others at the expense of your own well-being. An exhausted individual cannot effectively support anyone. A person disconnected from their own aspirations, their health, and their core purpose becomes a functional but hollow shell, serving others but not truly living. They may be present physically, but their spirit is diminished. The world is populated by many such individuals: devoted parents, caring siblings, supportive colleagues, who have inadvertently neglected themselves. They have conflated love with complete self-sacrifice, and in striving to be everything to everyone, they have become diminished for themselves. It is imperative to understand that you cannot genuinely give what you do not possess. You cannot impart strength if you are living from a place of weakness. You cannot inspire if you are consumed by frustration. You cannot sustain others if you yourself are depleted. Therefore, prioritizing yourself is not an act of selfishness. It is a strategic imperative, a mark of emotional intelligence, and the foundation upon which you can genuinely assist others without self-immolation. When you grow, those around you tend to grow as well. When you shine, you illuminate the possibility for others to do the same. When you assert boundaries with clarity, you are teaching healthy relational dynamics. And when you place your own needs at the forefront, you are not abandoning others. You are preparing yourself to serve them more effectively and sustainably. However, the mantra of everyone else first has been deeply ingrained over years, perhaps influenced by cultural norms, familial expectations, or past experiences. If you fail to critically examine this ingrained belief, it will continue to steer your decisions, compelling you to overwork, overextend, and concede excessively, while your own aspirations languish in neglect. One day, you may look in the mirror and question when you last made a choice solely for yourself, when you last truly listened to your own needs, when you last consciously positioned yourself as a priority. If the answer is elusive, it is time for a decisive shift. From this day forward, internalize this declaration: I can best help others when I am strong. To be strong, I must choose myself. This does not imply constant, selfish preoccupation, but rather a conscious, deliberate act of self-consideration. Your rest, your personal projects, your emotional equilibrium. All of these hold significant importance. When you embrace this truth without guilt or justification, your actions transform. You rise with renewed energy, establish boundaries with greater ease, and build with a sense of inner peace, free from resentment. Remember, those who genuinely care for you do not wish to see you depleted. They desire to see you whole, fulfilled, and vibrant. Therefore, Do not betray yourself in the name of service. The most profound act of service you can offer is to become the most complete version of yourself. This transformation is only possible when you cease placing yourself on the back burner and begin walking purposefully toward what invigorates you, even if it initially presents discomfort or a degree of emotional challenge. For when you are whole, you can give from a place of abundance, not scarcity, and that, in itself, changes everything. The ninth deeply ingrained thought that undermines your potential, often presented as a factual summary of past events, is actually a premature conclusion that seals off future possibilities. I already tried, and it didn't work. This statement, far from being an objective report, functions as a self-imposed decree, a definitive closure that prematurely halts any further exploration. It doesn't merely describe what occurred, it dictates what will inevitably happen next. This is one of the most tragic forms of self-sabotage, leveraging past failures as irrefutable evidence of future impossibility. Perhaps you invested considerable effort, poured your heart and soul into an endeavor, and met with failure. Perhaps the world seemed to mock your attempts, and that sting is profound. The natural inclination is to avoid repeating such painful experiences, to shield oneself from further exposure to the feeling of failure. However, you must grasp this fundamental truth. A single failed attempt does not preordain your destiny. It is merely a single step, one that, however indirectly, moved you closer, even if the immediate result was not apparent. That attempt provided invaluable lessons, revealing what not to do, what adjustments are necessary, and which aspects of yourself require further development. But if you transform that experience into an excuse for perpetual inaction, then that step was not a progression. It was a self-inflicted burial. Do not punish yourself for having failed. The true failure lies in the cessation of trying. The individual who drowns is the one who abandons the struggle. The spirit that extinguishes is the one that relinquishes the effort. Because the reality is this: you are not defined by what you did not achieve, but by your unwavering willingness to continue building. If the thought, "I already tried, and it didn't work," continues to dominate your mental landscape, then every ensuing opportunity will be met with the internal refrain that it's not worth the effort. This is not reality. It is a defense mechanism, a protective shell designed to prevent further emotional injury. The inherent problem with this shell is that it simultaneously impedes your growth. One cannot truly evolve if they refuse to engage in the process of starting anew. Ask yourself a simple yet crucial question. Is the pain of trying again more daunting than the enduring regret of wondering, what if? Is the temporary discomfort of another potential failure more unbearable than living a life devoid of genuine effort and aspiration? There are men who falter, only to rise with enhanced wisdom. And there are men who stumble once and choose to remain buried forever. Which path will you choose? Will you be the man who transmutes failed attempts into invaluable experience, or the one who converts experience into a perpetual excuse? You must state this with absolute sincerity. Perhaps it didn't work before, but I am not the same person today. If you have genuinely learned, grown, and evolved, then it is not mere stubbornness, but a testament to your development to re-engage. You will approach it with greater precision, more seasoned resilience, and a deeper reservoir of character. And even if you falter again, you will continue to learn. Eventually, the focus will shift from the number of attempts to the depth of your perseverance, the agility of your adjustments, and the unyielding commitment to your vision, irrespective of external commentary. Significant achievements are invariably realized by those who refuse to conclude their narrative prematurely. You hold the pen. Will you inscribe an ending of surrender, or will you continue writing the next chapter? A chapter of improvement, a chapter dedicated to the life you still profoundly deserve to build? What didn't succeed in the past is not your predetermined sentence. It is merely another rung on the ladder, and rungs are not failures, but integral components of the ascent toward your ultimate destination. The 10th and final thought, often the most subtly devastating and universally adopted, acts as a comfortable prison. I'm fine just like this. This statement, which purports to signify peace, is in reality resignation elegantly disguised. It's the voice that emerges when the will to strive has waned, when survival within mediocrity has become an ingrained art form. when comfort has been found in a state that neither causes acute pain nor offers significant challenge. Fine, in this context, does not equate to fulfillment. It signifies contentment with complacency. It means you have ceased to envision a higher plane of existence, that you have silenced the inner voice that once propelled you toward growth, and that you are now merely existing, rather than truly living. I understand this fatigue. There comes a point where the relentless effort, the repeated attempts, the constant pressure can feel overwhelming. The desire for rest, for an end to suffering, becomes paramount. However, when this desire for rest solidifies into a way of life, you are, in essence, surrendering with a veneer of sophistication. You are wrapping your dormant potential in the mundane fabric of routine. You are extinguishing your inner fire for fear of being burned again. And while you tell yourself, "I'm fine," you are not fine. You are anesthetized. The mind, predictably, gravitates towards the familiar, even if that familiarity is insufficient. It favors the predictable, even if it leaves you feeling unfulfilled. The "I'm fine" mentality allows for continued existence without the discomfort of introspection, without persistent questioning, and without demanding more of yourself. But it also curtails evolution, stifles intensity, and diminishes your sense of purpose. For purpose does not flourish in excessive comfort. It blossoms in the soil of genuine desire, persistent curiosity, dissatisfaction with the status quo, and a clear vision of what could be. Observe your surroundings, your daily existence. Ask yourself with unsparing honesty, am I truly living, or am I merely maintaining my current state? Do your days ignite enthusiasm within you, or are they mere repetitions of a soulless ritual? Do you sense that there is still something more to build, to achieve? Or have you bartered your inner strength for the passage of time, for the weight of weariness, for the simple act of being? For what ultimate gain? The man who declares, "I'm fine just like this," forfeits his claim to a different future. It's not about being perpetually unhappy, but about aspiring to more depth, more meaning, more presence, greater impact, a richer, fuller life. The most tragic aspect is that this thought rarely leads to a sudden demise. It induces a slow fade, an unacknowledged diminishment. Ambition, energy, and dreams gradually wither until one day you awaken to the stark realization that years have passed, little has fundamentally changed, and the primary accomplishment has been to sustain a way of life that no longer serves you, driven by the fear of losing the little you possess. But you were not meant to sustain. You were meant to advance, to expand, to discover. If something within you stirs at these words, if you feel a confrontational resonance, it is a sign that you are not, in fact, fine. And this discomfort is a blessing, for as long as discomfort persists, so too does momentum. And where there is momentum, there is the capacity for profound change. Therefore, cease uttering that phrase. Do not repeat it. Do not believe it. Replace it with a declaration that awakens you, that propels you to your feet, that pulls you from lethargy. Declare, "I am capable of more. I deserve more. I am ready for the next level." Because when you alter that fundamental statement, you shift your energy. And when your energy shifts, the universe responds. Opportunities become visible. The right people sense your renewed vitality. And your life, your actual life, begins to pivot, not through magic, but through conscious decision. The true adversary is not scarcity, nor failure, nor fear itself. It is the comfortable, passive, numbing thought that whispers each morning, "You're fine like this." Silence that voice and usher in a new era, a new standard, a new you. For the most magnificent chapters of your story are still awaiting their authorship. Building on the understanding that our internal narratives shape our reality, let's delve into a potent, yet often overlooked, mechanism of self-sabotage, the profound inertia born from comfort itself. We've touched on the idea of being fine, but let's dissect the subtle, insidious ways that excessive comfort can stunt growth. Imagine an athlete who has achieved a certain level of proficiency. They've mastered the basic techniques, their performance is respectable, and they've secured a comfortable standing. Now, consider the temptation to plateau. The rigorous training feels less urgent, the sharp edge of ambition begins to dull, and the allure of maintaining the current status quo becomes potent. This isn't laziness in the overt sense. It's the quiet seduction of a stable equilibrium. The very absence of immediate crisis, the lack of acute external pressure, can inadvertently signal to the mind that the effort required for further advancement is no longer necessary. This creates a psychological environment where innovation falters, risk-taking diminishes, and the drive to push boundaries erodes, replaced by a preference for predictability. Consequently, what might appear as contentment is, in fact, a precursor to stagnation, a subtle opting out of the dynamic evolution that defines true progress. Furthermore, this complacency can manifest in our approach to problem solving. When faced with a challenge, instead of engaging in deep, creative inquiry to find a truly optimal solution, we might default to the path of least resistance. This isn't about solving the problem. It's about resolving the discomfort the problem presents. Think of a manager who consistently delegates tasks to the most capable team member, not because it fosters broader development, but because it guarantees a faster, more reliable outcome. While seemingly efficient in the short term, this approach deprives other team members of opportunities to learn and grow, ultimately creating a bottleneck and limiting the team's collective potential. This reflects a broader tendency to prioritize immediate ease over long-term systemic improvement, a subconscious preference for the known over the unknown, even when the known is demonstrably suboptimal. Conversely, consider the individual who, upon achieving a significant personal milestone, perhaps completing a demanding project or reaching a fitness goal, immediately relaxes their discipline. The intensity that fueled their achievement begins to dissipate, replaced by a more relaxed rhythm. This isn't about abandoning the goal, but about the subtle shift in internal urgency. The mind, having won this particular battle, begins to associate the peak performance state with discomfort and effort, and the settled state with relief and ease. This recalibration, while understandable, creates a psychological hurdle for future endeavors that demand a similar level of intensity. It establishes a pattern where high-demand periods are followed by extended periods of reduced effort, making it progressively harder to re-engage with that initial drive. Consequently, what appears as earned rest can become a comfortable detour away from the path of continuous, ambitious growth. Another critical layer to this phenomenon lies in how we process information and adapt to new circumstances. When our daily routines become too predictable, when our information intake is confined to echo chambers that reinforce existing beliefs, our cognitive flexibility begins to atrophy. Imagine someone who exclusively consumes news from a single, highly biased source. Their understanding of complex global issues becomes increasingly one-dimensional. When confronted with alternative perspectives, instead of engaging with curiosity, they might dismiss them outright, clinging to the comfort of their established worldview. This mental inflexibility, born from a desire to avoid cognitive dissonance and the discomfort of confronting unfamiliar ideas, significantly hinders our capacity for innovation and adaptation. It creates a self-imposed intellectual confinement, where the stimulating friction of diverse viewpoints is sacrificed for the placid surface of unchallenged assumptions, ultimately limiting our ability to navigate a complex and ever-changing world with agility and insight. Beyond the comfort of routine, another subtle but powerful saboteur emerges: the paralysis of overanalysis. This isn't just procrastination. It's an active engagement with excessive thinking that prevents action. Imagine a chess grandmaster meticulously calculating every possible move, every countermove, every nuanced outcome for minutes, even hours, on a single turn. While strategic depth is crucial, an extreme application can lead to an inability to make a decisive move, allowing the opponent to seize initiative. Similarly, when you find yourself dissecting a decision or a task to an obsessive degree, constantly seeking more data, more validation, more perfect clarity, you're not empowering yourself. You're effectively immobilizing yourself. You become so engrossed in the process of thinking about action that the action itself becomes a secondary, often abandoned, consideration. This intellectual entanglement creates a strong illusion of productivity. I'm working very hard on this problem, while the reality is a slow drift away from any tangible output. The sheer volume of internal processing can feel like significant effort, obscuring the fact that no real progress is being made. It's like a runner meticulously planning their race strategy down to the microsecond, analyzing wind resistance, elevation changes, and competitor gait, only to find the starting gun fires, and they are still mentally strategizing. Building on this, however, consider the insidious nature of analysis paralysis in the face of uncertainty. When the path forward isn't perfectly illuminated, our natural inclination is to gather more information. But at what point does information gathering morph into avoidance? It happens when the fear of making the wrong choice outweighs the desire to make any choice. This is particularly potent in areas involving significant personal investment, such as career changes, major purchases, or complex relationships. You might find yourself endlessly researching different options, creating elaborate spreadsheets comparing pros and cons, and seeking advice from an ever-expanding circle of acquaintances, all the while deferring the actual commitment. The goal becomes not to find the best path, but to find a path that feels utterly risk-free, a path that, in its very nature, doesn't exist in the real world. Consequently, opportunities pass by, not because they weren't suitable, but because the deliberation process extended beyond their relevance. Furthermore, the impact of this overanalysis extends to our creative endeavors. Imagine an artist who has a brilliant concept for a painting. Instead of immediately sketching or applying pigment, they spend weeks, months even, perfecting the conceptual framework. They create elaborate manifestos for the artwork, write detailed descriptions of its intended emotional impact, and mentally rehearse the artistic process. While a strong conceptual foundation is valuable, this excessive theoretical exploration can stifle the organic flow of creativity. The raw, impulsive energy that often fuels groundbreaking art gets systematically diluted and intellectualized. The initial spark, the intuitive drive, gets buried under layers of self-conscious analysis, leading to a work that might be intellectually sound but emotionally sterile, or worse, never even manifests on canvas. The fear of not capturing the perfect essence of the idea leads to the abandonment of the idea itself. Consequently, this analytical tendency can erode resilience. When every potential pitfall is exhaustively mapped and feared, the prospect of actual failure becomes psychologically overwhelming. Instead of viewing setbacks as learning opportunities, they are perceived as catastrophic evidence of flawed initial analysis, reinforcing the belief that more extensive pre-planning was needed. This creates a vicious cycle. The fear of imperfect action leads to more analysis, which in turn magnifies the perceived risks, further inhibiting decisive action. This is distinct from strategic planning. It's a cognitive loop that prioritizes prediction over execution. For example, an entrepreneur might spend months refining a business plan, meticulously forecasting market trends, and anticipating every operational snag, yet delay launching because they haven't accounted for a hypothetical global event that could disrupt their supply chain. This obsessive foresight, while seemingly prudent, becomes a cage, preventing them from entering the arena and learning from real-world feedback, which is often far more valuable than any theoretical projection. Beyond the comfort of routine, another subtle but powerful saboteur emerges: the paralysis of overanalysis. This isn't just procrastination. It's an active engagement with excessive thinking that prevents action. Imagine a chess grandmaster meticulously calculating every possible move, every countermove, every nuanced outcome for minutes, even hours, on a single turn. While strategic depth is crucial, an extreme application can lead to an inability to make a decisive move, allowing the opponent to seize initiative. Similarly, when you find yourself dissecting a decision or a task to an obsessive degree, constantly seeking more data, more validation, more perfect clarity, you're not empowering yourself. You're effectively immobilizing yourself. You become so engrossed in the process of thinking about action that the action itself becomes a secondary, often abandoned, consideration. This intellectual entanglement creates a strong illusion of productivity. I'm working very hard on this problem, while the reality is a slow drift away from any tangible output. The sheer volume of internal processing can feel like significant effort, obscuring the fact that no real progress is being made. It's like a runner meticulously planning their race strategy down to the microsecond, analyzing wind resistance, elevation changes, and competitor gait, only to find the starting gun fires, and they are still mentally strategizing. Building on this, however, Consider the insidious nature of analysis paralysis in the face of uncertainty. When the path forward isn't perfectly illuminated, our natural inclination is to gather more information. But at what point does information gathering morph into avoidance? It happens when the fear of making the wrong choice outweighs the desire to make any choice. This is particularly potent in areas involving significant personal investment, such as career changes, major purchases, or complex relationships. You might find yourself endlessly researching different options, creating elaborate spreadsheets comparing pros and cons, and seeking advice from an ever-expanding circle of acquaintances, all the while deferring the actual commitment. The goal becomes not to find the best path, but to find a path that feels utterly risk-free, a path that, in its very nature, doesn't exist in the real world. Consequently, opportunities pass by, not because they weren't suitable, but because the deliberation process extended beyond their relevance. Furthermore, the impact of this overanalysis extends to our creative endeavors. Imagine an artist who has a brilliant concept for a painting. Instead of immediately sketching or applying pigment, they spend weeks, months even, perfecting the conceptual framework. They create elaborate manifestos for the artwork, write detailed descriptions of its intended emotional impact, and mentally rehearse the artistic process. While a strong conceptual foundation is valuable, this excessive theoretical exploration can stifle the organic flow of creativity. The raw, impulsive energy that often fuels groundbreaking art gets systematically diluted and intellectualized. The initial spark, the intuitive drive, gets buried under layers of self-conscious analysis, leading to a work that might be intellectually sound but emotionally sterile, or worse, never even manifests on canvas. The fear of not capturing the perfect essence of the idea leads to the abandonment of the idea itself. Consequently, this analytical tendency can erode resilience. When every potential pitfall is exhaustively mapped and feared, the prospect of actual failure becomes psychologically overwhelming. Instead of viewing setbacks as learning opportunities, they are perceived as catastrophic evidence of flawed initial analysis, reinforcing the belief that more extensive pre-planning was needed. This creates a vicious cycle. The fear of imperfect action leads to more analysis, which in turn magnifies the perceived risks, further inhibiting decisive action. This is distinct from strategic planning. It's a cognitive loop that prioritizes prediction over execution. For example, an entrepreneur might spend months refining a business plan, meticulously forecasting market trends, and anticipating every operational snag, yet delay launching because they haven't accounted for a hypothetical global event that could disrupt their supply chain. This obsessive foresight, while seemingly prudent, becomes a cage, preventing them from entering the arena and learning from real-world feedback, which is often far more valuable than any theoretical projection. Building on the understanding that our internal narratives shape our reality, let's delve into a potent, yet often overlooked, mechanism of self-sabotage, the profound inertia born from comfort itself. We've touched on the idea of being fine, but let's dissect the subtle, insidious ways that excessive comfort can stunt growth. Imagine an athlete who has achieved a certain level of proficiency. They've mastered the basic techniques, their performance is respectable, and they've secured a comfortable standing. Now, consider the temptation to plateau. The rigorous training feels less urgent, the sharp edge of ambition begins to dull, and the allure of maintaining the current status quo becomes potent. This isn't laziness in the overt sense, it's the quiet seduction of a stable equilibrium. The very absence of immediate crisis, the lack of acute external pressure, can inadvertently signal to the mind that the effort required for further advancement is no longer necessary. This creates a psychological environment where innovation falters, risk-taking diminishes, and the drive to push boundaries erodes, replaced by a preference for predictability. Consequently, what might appear as contentment is, in fact, a precursor to stagnation, a subtle opting out of the dynamic evolution that defines true progress. Furthermore, this complacency can manifest in our approach to problem-solving. When faced with a challenge, instead of engaging in deep, creative inquiry to find a truly optimal solution, we might default to the path of least resistance. This isn't about solving the problem. It's about resolving the discomfort the problem presents. Think of a manager who consistently delegates tasks to the most capable team member, not because it fosters broader development, but because it guarantees a faster, more reliable outcome. While seemingly efficient in the short term, this approach deprives other team members of opportunities to learn and grow, ultimately creating a bottleneck and limiting the team's collective potential. This reflects a broader tendency to prioritize immediate ease over long-term systemic improvement, a subconscious preference for the known over the unknown, even when the known is demonstrably suboptimal. Conversely, consider the individual who, upon achieving a significant personal milestone, perhaps completing a demanding project or reaching a fitness goal, immediately relaxes their discipline. The intensity that fueled their achievement begins to dissipate, replaced by a more relaxed rhythm. This isn't about abandoning the goal, but about the subtle shift in internal urgency. The mind, having won this particular battle, begins to associate the peak performance state with discomfort and effort, and the settled state with relief and ease. This recalibration, while understandable, creates a psychological hurdle for future endeavors that demand a similar level of intensity. It establishes a pattern where high-demand periods are followed by extended periods of reduced effort, making it progressively harder to re-engage with that initial drive. Consequently, what appears as earned rest can become a comfortable detour away from the path of continuous, ambitious growth. Another critical layer to this phenomenon lies in how we process information and adapt to new circumstances. When our daily routines become too predictable, when our information intake is confined to echo chambers that reinforce existing beliefs, our cognitive flexibility begins to atrophy. Imagine someone who exclusively consumes news from a single, highly biased source. Their understanding of complex global issues becomes increasingly one-dimensional. When confronted with alternative perspectives, instead of engaging with curiosity, they might dismiss them outright, clinging to the comfort of their established worldview. This mental inflexibility, born from a desire to avoid cognitive dissonance and the discomfort of confronting unfamiliar ideas, significantly hinders our capacity for innovation and adaptation. It creates a self-imposed intellectual confinement, where the stimulating friction of diverse viewpoints is sacrificed for the placid surface of unchallenged assumptions, ultimately limiting our ability to navigate a complex and ever-changing world with agility and insight. Beyond the comfort of routine, another subtle but powerful saboteur emerges: the paralysis of overanalysis. This isn't just procrastination, it's an active engagement with excessive thinking that prevents action. Imagine a chess grandmaster meticulously calculating every possible move, every countermove, every nuanced outcome for minutes, even hours, on a single turn. While strategic depth is crucial, an extreme application can lead to an inability to make a decisive move, allowing the opponent to seize initiative. Similarly, when you find yourself dissecting a decision or a task to an obsessive degree, constantly seeking more data, more validation, more perfect clarity, you're not empowering yourself. You're effectively immobilizing yourself. You become so engrossed in the process of thinking about action that the action itself becomes a secondary, often abandoned, consideration. This intellectual entanglement creates a strong illusion of productivity. I'm working very hard on this problem, while the reality is a slow drift away from any tangible output. The sheer volume of internal processing can feel like significant effort, obscuring the fact that no real progress is being made. It's like a runner meticulously planning their race strategy down to the microsecond, analyzing wind resistance, elevation changes, and competitor gait, only to find the starting gun fires, and they are still mentally strategizing. Building on this, however, consider the insidious nature of analysis paralysis in the face of uncertainty. When the path forward isn't perfectly illuminated, our natural inclination is to gather more information. But at what point does information gathering morph into avoidance? It happens when the fear of making the wrong choice outweighs the desire to make any choice. This is particularly potent in areas involving significant personal investment, such as career changes, major purchases, or complex relationships. You might find yourself endlessly researching different options, creating elaborate spreadsheets comparing pros and cons, and seeking advice from an ever-expanding circle of acquaintances, all the while deferring the actual commitment. The goal becomes not to find the best path, but to find a path that feels utterly risk-free, a path that, in its very nature, doesn't exist in the real world. Consequently, opportunities pass by, not because they weren't suitable, but because the deliberation process extended beyond their relevance. Furthermore, The impact of this overanalysis extends to our creative endeavors. Imagine an artist who has a brilliant concept for a painting. Instead of immediately sketching or applying pigment, they spend weeks, months even, perfecting the conceptual framework. They create elaborate manifestos for the artwork, write detailed descriptions of its intended emotional impact, and mentally rehearse the artistic process. While a strong conceptual foundation is valuable, this excessive theoretical exploration can stifle the organic flow of creativity. The raw, impulsive energy that often fuels groundbreaking art gets systematically diluted and intellectualized. The initial spark, the intuitive drive, gets buried under layers of self-conscious analysis, leading to a work that might be intellectually sound but emotionally sterile, or worse, never even manifests on canvas. The fear of not capturing the perfect essence of the idea leads to the abandonment of the idea itself. Consequently, this analytical tendency can erode resilience. When every potential pitfall is exhaustively mapped and feared, the prospect of actual failure becomes psychologically overwhelming. Instead of viewing setbacks as learning opportunities, they are perceived as catastrophic evidence of flawed initial analysis, reinforcing the belief that more extensive pre-planning was needed. This creates a vicious cycle. The fear of imperfect action leads to more analysis, which in turn magnifies the perceived risks, further inhibiting decisive action. This is distinct from strategic planning. It's a cognitive loop that prioritizes prediction over execution. For example, an entrepreneur might spend months refining a business plan, meticulously forecasting market trends, and anticipating every operational snag, yet delay launching because they haven't accounted for a hypothetical global event that could disrupt their supply chain. This obsessive foresight, while seemingly prudent, becomes a cage, preventing them from entering the arena and learning from real-world feedback, which is often far more valuable than any theoretical projection. Reflecting on this journey so far, we've navigated the intricate landscape of internal dialogue, unearthing the quiet architects of limitation. It's become increasingly clear that the patterns we've examined are not isolated incidents, but rather interconnected threads, weaving a complex tapestry of how we perceive ourselves and our potential. The cumulative effect of these internal dialogues, these subtle yet persistent whispers, is akin to a ship charting a course through a perpetually foggy sea, its direction dictated not by the distant lighthouse, but by the immediate, shifting currents of self-doubt. The perceived obstacles, the external challenges that once loomed so large, begin to recede in significance as the true terrain of engagement shifts inward. As we pivot towards the final reflection, the emergent understanding isn't about simply identifying the fog, but about recognizing the compass that has been available all along, albeit obscured. In light of these insights, the path forward becomes clearer, not as a series of distinct steps, but as a fundamental recalibration of perspective. The convergence of these explored ideas suggests a profound shift from a reactive stance to a proactive one, moving from a position of being acted upon by internal forces to one of actively directing them. This transition is not about a singular breakthrough, but about the sustained practice of inner cultivation. It's akin to tending a garden. The soil must be prepared, the seeds carefully chosen, and consistent care provided, not for a single harvest, but for enduring vitality. The implications of this ongoing cultivation are vast, promising not just a different outcome, but a fundamentally different way of being in the world, one where perceived limitations dissolve into boundless opportunities for growth and self-expression. The journey thus far has laid the groundwork, illuminating the internal topography, and now, we stand at the precipice of fully integrating these discoveries, preparing to harness their transformative power. The intricate interplay of thought, belief, and action has been laid bare, revealing not a set of insurmountable barriers, but rather a dynamic system capable of profound redirection. This recognition serves as the crucial bridge, leading us towards a final, empowering affirmation of inherent capability and the boundless potential for a life intentionally crafted. As we draw this exploration to a close, it's crucial to distill the profound realization that has been unfolding. The battle for your true potential is not waged on external battlefields, but within the intricate architecture of your own mind. The limiting beliefs we've unearthed, The whispers of doubt you've learned to recognize are not immutable laws of nature. They are learned patterns, ingrained narratives that, with conscious effort and unwavering resolve, can be rewritten. The very thoughts that have held you captive are not inherent truths, but rather habitual responses, and like any habit, they can be unlearned and replaced with empowering perspectives. This isn't about a quick fix or a superficial alteration. It's a fundamental re-engineering of your internal operating system, a deliberate cultivation of a mindset that aligns with your highest aspirations. The journey from recognizing these internal saboteurs to truly mastering them is not a race, but a lifelong commitment to mindful engagement. It is in the quiet moments, the everyday decisions, the persistent practice of challenging those ingrained narratives, that your true transformation takes root. It is about understanding that your past does not define your future, that age is a number and not a barrier, and that perfection is not a prerequisite for progress, but often an illusion that prevents it. The courage to step forward, even imperfectly, to embrace the uncertainty, and to learn from every stumble, is the bedrock upon which genuine achievement is built. Your capacity for growth is not finite. It is an ever-expanding frontier, limited only by the beliefs you choose to honor. Consider this: the strength you seek, the clarity you desire, the success you envision. These are not external rewards to be bestowed upon you, but emergent properties of your internal state. When you cease to betray yourself with limiting thoughts, when you begin to trust in your inherent capacity, and when you commit to the ongoing process of self-mastery, your external reality begins to shift in profound and undeniable ways. The world does not change. Your interaction with it, your interpretation of its events, your response to its challenges, all transform. This transformation is not about eradicating fear, but about learning to act in its presence, to acknowledge it without letting it dictate your direction. It is about understanding that resilience is not the absence of difficulty, but the determined response to it. Therefore, the true practice begins now, not in grand gestures, but in the daily, conscious choice to align your thoughts with your deepest values and most ambitious goals. It is in the persistent affirmation of your worth, not based on external validation, but on the unwavering commitment to your own evolution. Embrace the understanding that every moment is an opportunity to choose a different narrative, to take a bolder step, to embody the man you aspire to be. The power has always resided within you. It is now time to fully awaken it, to harness its immense potential, and to step into the extraordinary life that awaits your intentional creation. Your journey of self-mastery is not a destination, but a continuous unfolding, a testament to the boundless capacity of the human spirit when guided by an empowered mind and an unwavering heart.